Just hear me out. The next Avatar series is stated to release in 2025, continuing the lineage of avatars, this one being born from the Earth Kingdom. And we're all super hyped. But I can't help still believe that they should create a prequel series. And here are the reasons why. So here's the crazy thing about the avatars. Starting off with Avatar 1, right? Each avatar had to clean up the issues of their predecessor. Yes, that is true. Every issue that they left or every misstep that they just blew over rolled over into the next avatar, their successor. Wan could not bring everyone together and thus passed on his lineage over into the next avatar and that avatar and so on and so forth. But there were thousands of avatars before Aang, thousands of avatars before Kora, and thousands of avatars before whatever the next avatar is, Genji. Clean up after your predecessors to bring the world into balance. Now again, I don't want to have to go through all of the thousands of avatars to explain their stories, but let's start off with Avatar Szeto. Now, Avatar Szeto was a Fire Nation avatar. He is from the Fire Nation and thus was a firebender. In his case though, a lava bender prodigy. You see, Avatar Szeto was born during a very tumultuous time in the Fire Nation's history. Warring shoguns and different kingdoms ruled over the Fire Nation. Famine, disease, war plagued the land. And thus, Avatar Szeto abandoned his true nature to bring balance to the world in order to uplift and create a stable Fire Nation. He spends his life focused solely on the Fire Nation. And the way that he does this is through diplomacy, through bureaucracy. Avatar Szeto was a diplomat and united his nation, the Fire Nation. He was able to bring all of the chiefs, the shoguns, all together and create a new Fire Nation, very prosperous in its truth. But that neglect of the balance bled over into the next avatar, Avatar Yangchen. Now, Yangchen saw that her predecessor neglected the balance of the four nations to make sure that every nation was okay, to bring peace to the world. In her time, the Fire Nation was very, very prosperous, due solely in part to Zeto's upheaval of the Fire Nation because of his bureaucracy and diplomacy in the nation. Where Avatar Szeto focused on the Fire Nation, Yangchen focused on all four nations, but neglected the spirit world. You see, Yangchen was so focused on bringing balance to all the other nations, she neglected the spirit world entirely. One of her biggest downfalls, especially being close to spirits as an air nomad, being in tune with the spiritual world is one of the core factors of that nation, and she neglected it. She focused on the physical world versus the spiritual. Because of this neglect on the spirits, dark spirits were able to enter into the mortal world and bleed into our next avatar, Avatar Kuruk. You see, Avatar Kuruk is thought to be the lazy avatar because he came into a world of decent amount of balance between the nations, but unbalance in the spirit world. Yangchen neglected the spirit world so much that dark spirits were entering into the mortal world. Kora was rarely seen in the mortal world, and when he was having a good time, so on and so forth. The reason being is because he was trying to hide Yangchen's secret, that she neglected the spirit world and that demons, dark spirits, were coming into ours. His whole mission was to fight these spirits constantly in order to keep the mortal world safe, and unknowing of his predecessor's faults. Because of that, he's the silent avatar. He lost everything, but he kept the world safe and brought balance to the spirit world, but not to the mortal. Because he neglected or wasn't able to keep the mortal world in check because he was saving it from the dark spirits, the other nations were in disarray. And thus, when it passed on to the next avatar, Kyoshi, there was a lot of turmoil between all of the nations. There were no more angry and dark spirits bleeding into the mortal world, but there was a lot of infighting between the nations. Her focus then became to restore the balance of the world, to restore the four nations, to bring leaders together, to drop tyrants. And thus, she created peace. There was peace in both the spirit world and in the mortal world. But that peace is not to be taken lightly. And that would bleed over into Roku. Avatar Roku was born during a great era of peace, and thus could not see the looming threat that was upon him and the world. Because Kyoshi brought peace, he undoubtedly allowed his friendship with the Fire Lord to corrupt his ability to stop the civil war of the Fire Nation. And of course, this bled over into Avatar Aang, who had to clean up after Roku, had to bring the nations together, stop Sozin, and put an end to the civil war. And almost as if history repeats itself, Kora was born in an era of peace. And whenever there's peace, there is darkness looming. She had to not only maintain peace, but bring balance to the spirit world and the neglect to non-benders, but at a loss of her spiritual connection to her past lives. Genji, or the next avatar, will have to deal with the maintain of peace and the disconnection between his past lives. This is why they should create an Avatar prequel series.